only like cities. I think he never spent 3 days in a row in the country. He said silence made him anxious.
He was a little man, you know. That's what Charlie Chaplin was called in his first films, the little man.
Most of the time very depressed, I can say, and you can see that when I'm with you, or I'm really lost and I really don't know what to do, and I'm not sure about art, I'm not sure about my art, but that's also, you can't see that when you are making a film. We are in the free market of Vanves, which is close from my home, and I go here nearly every Sunday. You know, it's always trying to see the combination of all the objects. Bonjour. C'est humide, hein? C'est pénible. Oui, là. Very often I found photos here, or old magazines, or kind of small objects. I mean, I can say part of my work was coming from here. For me, it's much more useful to go in this kind of place than to go, by example, in a museum of modern art or something like that, because you always change old image or strange image or strange things. Vous prenez ensemble pour 300, mais je vous laisse un truc de carte postale. Les cartes postales, ça
bon, allez,
300.
300.
Je vous
C'est
prends
mon
tout.
jour de bonté aujourd'hui.
D'accord. C'est un seul jour pour vous. Si froid, je trouve.
In my life, there's no one way to look at my work, but you can imagine that I'm also a very funny artist, and I wish to stay like a funny artist in a way.
Qui peut m'aider à transporter ça? Très lourd.
You use photographs and you use letters and books and bits of film. Why do you use what you yourself call very stupid material? Why do you want to do that?
Because I want to find material which is very close from the people. For example, when I decided to use the biscuit boxes, it was because the biscuit boxes, it's a minimal piece in a way. But it's also something that everybody knows. I mean, most of the child in France, they have a biscuit box at home for the small treasure. And that's the idea of protection, but protection was not a real protection. But it's also something when you look at them who can remind you the place to put the ashes. That's a piece about dead Swiss. I make a lot of work with dead Swiss people, and for me it's a work about the idea of vanitas in a way, because all these people are now ashes, but they were rich or poor, and some are ugly, you know, nice or not nice, and now they're ashes. At home I have thousands of photos of dead Swiss. The Swiss die all the time, and when a Swiss die, they put this photo in the newspaper, and I wanted to cut up all the photos of all these people, and like that I have plenty of dead Swiss. Perhaps for 1 week, I don't know, 40 or 50 new dead Swiss. For me, it was really impossible to work with dead German or dead Jewish, and I choose the Swiss people because the Swiss, they have no historical reason to die. I mean, they are so clean and so neutral and so perfect that there's really no reason that the Swiss died. The first time I showed this piece was in a gallery. The dealer, she becomes quite mad because there was a lot of people, and it was falling down every hour, really. And she was very nervous because she was trying to work in the office, and every hour, and they have to do it another time, and she becomes very nervous. After 1 month, it was completely crazy. And that's good.
Several times you've talked about what will appeal to people and to the people and going out to the people. This is obviously very important to you. Why do you think it's important, and how do you want to reach them?
You know, what I'm doing in my life is to be some kind of a bad preacher. I mean, if my favorite movie is A Night of the Hunter with Richard Mitchum of Charles Lawton. I don't know if you know this movie. It was a marvelous movie.
Night of the Hunter. Yeah.
And in this movie, there's Charles Lawton with on the same time he's a preacher, on the same time he killed a woman. And he's my image, and I wish to be like that. I mean, I'm some kind of a preacher, but I'm a very bad preacher. And on the other way, I'm a clown, on the other way, I'm a crook.
I really like those things he called comical skits. They were little sketches in the Central European cabaret tradition, always somewhere between laughter and tears.
Is the idea of traditional art, is that a way of looking at your work, or is it rather useless to think of traditional art and look at your work? I mean, do you need that tradition in order to do the work you do?
I think I'm in the art history, and I'm only a painter of the end of the 20th century. And, you know, I'm going to be in museum, just like we're all going to be in cemetery. And after, people are going to say, oh, he was an artist of the end of the 20th century. But what I like, really, and what I really hope, that everybody can be touched, and be touched by the first, you know, first feeling.
I think this is another aspect about his work that's so appealing, is the fact that, again, you can respond on a very gut level. You respond very emotionally, very directly, and yet intellectually it's also quite brilliant. He works in many layers, in many strata, and in ways so that you are constantly challenged.
I'm just a traditional artist. I mean, I use photos, but it's just like to use painting. And there's nothing better to use photos of painting. I work with this magazine, Signal. I work very often with magazine, old magazine. I love it, an old magazine. I'm looking a lot to magazine. But that's a magazine with strange. It was made by the German army. It was for French people, and during the war, in 43. And in this magazine, it was funny for me because you have plenty of things. And I only made a piece with collage, because inside the magazine you have these pages, but I cannot explain that. You know, it was like that, we can say. That these pages is relation between this, and these pages is relation between that, and this page is relation between that. But if you open the magazine, you have some kind of a strange collage about two reality. I mean, about war and dance, or about countryside and warplane, or beautiful woman and military, or war and flowers, or painting and soldiers, or diamonds and soldier. And for me it was interesting to do that, because I think when we read now a newspaper, we have in the same newspaper some awful image of the war in Yugoslavia and the last image of the last theater play. That's really collage, but that's collage I didn't do because I only opened the newspaper. When I go in Italy, and when I go in a church in Italy, and I see this so large and beautiful painting, for a poor man of this time, it was really, you know, Hollywood, because, you know, you have always wars and murderers and some naked woman and events, and now it's very difficult to look at the painting in the same way. When I go to the Louvre is only sex and violence. So that's just like the TV. You know, it's the same, it's only image of sex and violence. And I am sure that one of the pleasure to the people to look at the painting at the Renaissance was to see nude woman, image of violence. You know, it was just like
Absolutely.
Films.
No question. I agree with that. I mean, that's a theory that I've held for a long time. I'm glad to see it confirmed. But what about the craft side of traditional art, Christian? Because one of the things that people stayed and looked at in those churches was the feeling that they couldn't do that. They couldn't possibly paint like that. They couldn't make figures that looked like that. Now, some people would say, well, I can put 1,000 kilos of used clothes in a room. I can do that. Therefore, I don't fully respect the man who does that.
No, that's perhaps a problem. But that's why I said I'm a preacher. I mean, I'm an artist and also a preacher. Because perhaps what I try to do now is only to give some rules or to say little stories that everybody can do. And in fact, everybody can do my work. And what is important for me is to give the rules, and everybody can do it for me. I mean, there is no other idea that I touch it. You know, there is something always very funny, that in the Middle Age, for a town, when the town wanted to be rich, they have to find a little bones of early man somewhere. And if they found these little bones, they built a very large cathedral, and there's plenty of people who go there and pray, and there's a fair, and the town becomes rich. And now, for a town who wants to become rich, they must have two Van Gogh or two Mondrian. And it's exactly the same, and that's the reason that there are so many museums of modern art everywhere. It's only like the old cathedral with some kind of holy relics. And
So you think that Van Gogh is a holy relic?
Absolutely. I think most of the artwork is turning around the idea of the relic. And perhaps it's something I want to change.
It's a place with there's people who are living around. There's some artists who are living around, and so some homeless who are living around. And we decided here to make a piece with plenty of clothes, and people can buy the clothes for 10 francs. I mean, they have a bag, and they can fill the bag with all the clothes they want for 10 francs. Bon, tout va partir. C'est vraiment la dispersion, là. Comment vous avez été courant de ça? And what was interesting for me, that was the clothes before there was only clothes. Here, in a way, it's some kind of a show. And when the people take the clothes, they become really clothes all the time. And they are art object. In any case, here they are in an art space, but they are no more to be art object after. Because when you are an artist, you never know if your work is good or not, and if your work is going to stay for some time. In any case, a large part of my work is going to disappear because it's very fragile, and I'm very pleased of that. And I destroyed a lot of my pieces, and I think that is good also. If you want to move people, it's always better to be just at the edge of the life and art. That we're only artists. I mean, I'm only a poor artist. I mean, I'm only artificial and artist. But if you want to touch people, it's always better that the people who are reading you or people who are looking at your art piece, they don't know exactly if it is art or life.
But do you think you're significant in the sense that you, and let's just stick to you as we're sticking to you and as we know that you're not going to tell us about you, but do you think that you're changing things, that things are going to change because of what you've done, that people are going to look for art in different areas and in different ways?
I'm sure what I said before, that I'm going to be in museum like we're in cemetery, and it will be finished and it will be the end. But I'm sure...
Why is it to be the end to be in a museum? Quite a lot of young artists would think, gosh, if I ended up my artistic career in the Tate Gallery or the Musée d'Orsay, I'd be quite pleased with myself.
And that's just like big library. I'm not against that, but just like big libraries. I mean, that's something that is out of the life. That's finished. But when you are alive, it's always possible to touch people in another way or to move people in another way. And that shows that it's much more easy for of Cologne, and distribute 16,000 little posters to people who are going to take the train. And for the people who receive little posters, they don't know what it is. There's an image of a child and some text, but they don't know what it is. And I think they can be touched in a way much more strong than if it was in a museum, because in a museum, they know it's modern art, they know it's art, they know it's something different and something not dangerous for them. Just after the war, the family were separated, and there was plenty of German children walking the road looking for the parents, and the Red Cross took them and printed plenty of posters to try to find the parents of all these children. And now it seems interesting for me to try to find them again, because now they are 50 or 52, and perhaps if we can find them, we have some kind of the destiny of Germany, because I'm sure perhaps this one becomes very rich, and another one becomes very poor, and was at the East, and what does it mean 40 years in Germany? I try to be in the station and that people can recognize some of them. In any case, if they don't recognize these children, they can have the memory of this time and what happened to us during this period, and that's the meaning of the work.
I think these people are looking for their